Welcome back to On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 11. And today we are reviewing the Australian Grand Prix. It was a very early wake-up call for those who decided to get up for it. I myself did not. I watched the replay, I think it was at like 9 a.m. So 4 a.m. wake-up call. Did you manage to get up for it, Adrian Kisa, joining me today?
I did, and it was a happy one for me. I'm not going to spoil anything, but everybody will know what happened down under. Um, so I initially set my alarm for 3:30, because I was working that day. So I initially set my alarm for 3:30, and I managed to wake up at 3:30, but then silly old me fell asleep. And I didn't wake up until I think 4:15. And by that time, I saw a certain someone retire from a race, which was exciting. And from that point on, I was hooked. So I sort of made it. I sort of didn't. The main thing, I watched the majority of the race, and I know what sort of happened. And it was a very good weekend for a certain Scuderia team, wasn't it?
It definitely was. So if we get into it then, so we'll start off by looking at Friday practice, which is something we don't usually do. But one of the biggest talking points was that Alex Albon had a big crash in FP1, damaging the chassis for that Williams. And in the end, Williams did not have a spare chassis with them in Australia. So Logan Sargent had to give up his race seat for Alex Albon in order to let him participate, meaning that Sargent did not take any further part in practice. Now I was quite shocked when this happened. I get the sense that, Albon is the best chance at scoring points for Williams, but it feels incredibly harsh when Sargent didn't put a foot wrong in practice on Friday, and he was essentially kicked out of the seat for the rest of the weekend and not allowed to compete in the race. What was that? What did you make of that?
My overriding emotions and feelings are how have Williams not got a spare chassis? Which is, I mean, James Vowles even came out and said that they were so behind in winter preparation that they just simply did not have a spare chassis. And in the modern era, not to have a spare chassis is absolutely criminal. I don't understand why they did not have a spare chassis on board. And just simply had to make the decision of booting Logan Sargent out of his seat, in favour of Alex Albon for the rest of the remainder of the Australian Grand Prix. If I was Logan Sargent, I'd find it very disheartening to see that the team is booting you out. They're giving you an extension on your contract after scoring a point for them. And then to have a decent performance in FP1 and just to get booted out of your seat like that, in favour of your more experienced and more talented teammates, shall we say? Yeah, it's a hard a hard pill to swallow. For if you're Logan Sargent. But I mean, Logan Sargent can't complain. Williams had to do what they had to do, and Alex Albon is essentially their best chance at scoring points. So if you're looking at it from an Alex Albon perspective, you're thinking, right, shame for my teammate, but I've got to do what I've got to do. And for Logan Sargent, it's just completely disheartening and shows that the team have a sort of lack of belief in him, going into Australia. And it's just one of them situations where I think the Williams team and maybe the FIA kind of had to have a look why there was no spare chassis. Why did Williams not bring a spare chassis to Australia, and why did this sort of happen in the modern day? Because usually spare chassis gets it into the car, jobs are good, and but why Williams did not have that? It will go down to an internal investigation, probably. But yeah, Logan Sargent will probably feel disheartened by the situation and will have felt a bit of lack of belief from the team, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost that trust element, isn't it? The team clearly don't trust him. And, whilst I think everybody can agree Alex Albon is more likely to score points than Logan Sargent, it's punishing a driver for not making for doing nothing wrong. This is a crucial season for Logan Sargent. He's only been given a 1 year extension, and he was under a lot of pressure last season. There was a lot of questions whether he should get an extension. So if he doesn't perform this season, he won't be getting an extension on that contract, and he probably won't end up in F1 again. So he really needs to have a good season. So all of these, every single race is crucial for him. He started off the season steadily behind Albon, but this might have been his weekend. You never know. There was a few retirements. There was a lot of incidents. A few drivers from the lower teams got points. So why couldn't it be him? But yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure, for him. I don't think we've ever. I can't remember the last time I've seen it where a driver's been kicked out of their seat because their teammate has crashed, and it doesn't quite sit right with me. Moving on to qualifying though, so out in Q1, so we had Zhou in 19th. There was only 4 eliminated, remember, because of Logan Sargent. Ricciardo down in 18th, Gasly 17th, and Hulkenberg 16th. Let's talk about Daniel Ricciardo, because he's had a difficult start to the season, I think it's fair to say. He's a long way, especially in qualifying. He is quite far behind his teammate. How much of a concern is this early season form from Ricciardo?
Well, there's already speculations about Ricardo having the ultimatum, 2 races and you're gone, type of thing. So it's definitely going down to the wire for Ricardo. And it's a tough start to the season because he's not scored a point yet. His qualifying performances have been subpar. Sonoda has been scoring points here, left, right, and centre. He's been getting good qualifying performances. And it's just, I don't know what's happening with Daniel Ricciardo, but it's just seemed to not have clicked. Last season, he got given the second half of the season in the AlphaTauri car, now the V carbohydrate, and like I say, it just has not clicked. I don't know why. I can't put my finger down on it because his teammates doing so well. Yuki Tsunoda is flying, and he's reaping rewards, and he's probably showing off his best talents, trying to get that Aston Martin seat off Fernando Alonso if he makes a late switch to a Mercedes or a Red Bull, wherever he goes in silly season. Um, but yeah, especially in your home race, um, you've got your home crowd behind you, and I wouldn't say a massive weight on your shoulders because Daniel Ricciardo has driven in Australia what 6, 7 times now, I believe, maybe even more.
More than that,
So
for at least 10.
yeah, I'm thinking it was 2010 that he started. So what's that? No, 8 years up to the COVID season. So probably his 10th, 11th time around Albert Park. Sorry, I just don't know. I really don't know what's with Daniel Ricciardo, but I think with him giving this ultimatum, it kind of needs to be like a rocket fuel inside of him because if he doesn't pick up his performances, his race seat could be gone. Liam Lawson could be jumping into that race seat, and we know what Liam Lawson did last season, in place of Daniel Ricciardo. So only time will tell. But for Daniel Ricciardo, his qualifying performances haven't been great. His race performances have been all right, especially the one in Australia, but it's still a long way away from his teammate, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Nico Hulkenberg also out in Q1. That's his first Q1 elimination so far this season. Previously, he's qualified 10th and 15th. We won't talk too much about it because we know obviously how Haas performed, but it's again Kevin Magnussen outperforming on the Saturday Nico Hulkenberg, who last season was seen as a qualifying. That was one of the big strengths of the Haas, and he's outqualified him now for the second time in a row, twice in 3 races now. We've spoken a lot about Kevin Magnussen, particularly last season, about how is he a bit fortunate to stay in that seat, but he's doing all he can, isn't he? He's doing all he can to keep that seat beyond this season, and so far you cannot fault his performances one bit.
You never know. Kevin Magnussen may have also got an ultimatum from the Haas team, and he's reaping the rewards. He's simply just taken the pressure and he's just thriving in the pressure. So yeah, second time in three races that Nico Hulkenberg's been out qualified by Kevin Magnussen. Last season you would not have thought that this would happen, because Hulkenberg's qualifying performances were just sensational. Most of the time qualifying into Q3 and into Q2, and it would be Kevin Magnussen that would be being knocked out in Q1. But yeah, I think it's just for a lot of Formula drivers, it's kind of the sink or swim, and I think right now Kevin Magnussen is swimming. He's thriving under the pressure, and I think it's a good type of pressure. I think um, to know that your teammate was out qualifying you last season, and this season you're winning the head to head. It's something that Kevin Magnussen has to take into China and into the rest of the races this season, and kind of have it as a guide to lead him to as many points as possible. Because, like we know, when the top five teams are on form, they're on form, and points might be limited. So to see Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg performing so well, especially in the last two races, for a Haas team, it benefits them a lot. It's obviously boosted them in the Constructors' Championship, and it's all about prize money. It's all about sponsorship money, prize money. But for Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, they've got a good friendship there. They've got well, I mean, when they weren't teammates, they didn't have a good friendship per se. But I think both of them are a lot more experienced now, and I think as we saw, especially in Saudi Arabia, they work well as a team. So for a Haas team, no matter who qualifies ahead of the other, the teamwork is there, and it's just building blocks for Haas, and hopefully they can continue in this rich vein of form.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on then to Q2. So Ocon qualified down in 15th, managed to get into Q2 after the early season struggles at Alpine. Kevin Magnussen, who we just spoke about, was qualified in 14th in the end. Valtteri Bottas 13th, Alex Albon 12th. But the big talking point, Lewis Hamilton out in 11th, out of Q2. And, George Russell only just scraped through. He was only about 600th quicker than Hamilton. He was down in 10th place. So not a good start to the season from Mercedes. How much of a concern is it that, particularly Hamilton, because Russell has outqualified him in each race so far? How much of a worry is this sort of struggle from Mercedes and particularly Lewis Hamilton?
Well, Ethan, I think who better to answer that question than yourself? What do you think is going? I'll answer it. First and foremost. Lewis Hamilton, well, they obviously went to the floor that was tested in Bahrain for preseason testing. And we don't know whether that switch benefited Lewis Hamilton completely. We saw him languishing in the near the bottom of FP2 and FP3. And it's just I don't know. It's similar to Ricardo. You can't put your finger on it because I mean both George Russell and Lewis Hamilton haven't been amazing so far this season. Let's be real. It's not been the barnstorming start that Mercedes would have wanted. But for Lewis Hamilton especially, was the flaw the massive issue? Was it the setup? Was it what? I don't know what you can put it down to. But Lewis Hamilton has gone out and said, and he said it openly, that this is probably the worst start to an F1 season that he's had in a long time. And for him to not go through to Q3, and to be out qualified by his teammate once again, by the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, by the likes of the Aston Martins, it's another hit to, I wouldn't say the Hamilton ego, I'd just say to his confidence. Because we're so accustomed to seeing Lewis Hamilton in Q3 and battling for the top two places, and Lewis Hamilton's had this sort of struggle for the last couple of seasons with Mercedes, where it's just not been up to scratch. In most parts, and especially in Australia, I don't think the car was just suited to Lewis Hamilton. it just wasn't the car that Lewis Hamilton expected it to be. And for him to be out qualified by George Russell and for him not to even qualifying into Q3, it's just a hit to his confidence, a hit to his self-esteem, a hit to the Mercedes brand itself, because Mercedes were expecting to sort of battle up with the Red Bulls and the Ferraris and the McLarens, and they've not done that whatsoever this season so far. Um, and yeah, it's just one of them where the package maybe is not right at the moment, but can be salvaged with upgrades, and those upgrades will obviously come down the line. And maybe Mercedes can salvage something from a bad situation, but for currently, they're not on that upward trajectory that they were expecting at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning, really, seeing how much Hamilton in particular has struggled, and the Mercedes has just been absolutely nowhere at times. In Bahrain, it was probably the third quickest. I think it was slightly quicker than the McLaren, but since then, it's not really been anywhere. I know Hamilton was unlucky with strategy in Jeddah, but it was nowhere here. Russell done a good job in the race, I thought, but obviously no points to show for it, which we'll get onto. But yeah, I think it almost seems like Hamilton is done with the team. I don't think he's been treated particularly well, considering as what he's done for that team. It's a shame to see it end like this. But yeah, it doesn't look. It's not a good look um, from Mercedes, and I don't think they're particularly treating their the guy who's won 6 world championships for them with a lot of class and dignity. But moving on to Q3. So on pole yet again for the third time in a row was Max Verstappen. Carlos Sainz on his return qualified on the front row. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz. Second place, only a couple of tenths behind Verstappen. And I saw actually a comparison of the two laps. And on that high-speed chicane at the end of sector 2, start of sector 3, Sainz made a reasonably big mistake, which cost him sort of 3 tenths, which would have been enough to at least be right on Verstappen's heels. It's a brilliant return, isn't it, from Carlos Sainz?
I don't think I need to speak too much about Carlos Sainz. It's just I'm just gonna say one thing and one thing only. Why are Ferrari letting go of Carlos Sainz? The only driver, bar the two Red Bulls, that's won a race in the last 2 seasons. He's won 2 races. Charles Leclerc's not won any. I love Charles Leclerc to bits, but why have you released Carlos Sainz when he's arguably in the form of his life, showing more consistency than ever, showing a lot more consistency than his teammate, and goes and wins the race after obviously his surgery 2 weeks ago. He even he even posed with Lando Norris just to flex it, just to rub it in the wound, flexing with his top off, and still an open wound there with a massive plaster, with a massive gash on his stomach. I can't put it to words, but yeah, what a return. Second place in qualifying, which turned out to be a race victory, but wow, what a return. It was simply breathtaking to see him qualify so well as well. I wasn't expecting that well of a qualifying from what I can see from my predictions. But I was expecting him to be up there and fighting. I was expecting a full heroic battle from Carlos Sainz, and we got that last weekend. We simply got that.
And then the rest of the top 10, Sergio Perez qualified in third. Obviously, got that 3 place penalty for impeding Hulkenberg. I think that may have contributed to him being knocked out in Q1. Lando Norris in fourth, Charles Leclerc fifth, splitting the two McLarens with Oscar Piastri in sixth. George Russell down in seventh. Yuki Tsunoda up in eighth. Great return from him. And then Lance Stroll beating Fernando Alonso in qualifying to secure a ninth place. If let's move on then to our 1 to 10 driver ratings, and there is no better place to start than the man who won, Carlos Sainz. It's an easy 10 out of 10. I don't think I need to justify this one bit. Three of the last four non-Red Bull victories have been from Carlos Sainz. The only other one was George Russell in Brazil 2022. But the last three Ferrari wins have been Carlos Sainz. And since this new era of car, Leclerc and Sainz have the same number of wins. I just think that's a crazy stat. And it goes to further your point, why are Ferrari letting him go? Obviously, they're bringing in the best. Lewis Hamilton, seven-time world champion, but Carlos Sainz is so deserving of a top seat. I really hope he either gets that Red Bull seat, which there's been a bit of speculation over, or the Mercedes seat, or even Aston Martin if Alonso goes to Mercedes, because he deserves to be right at the top of Formula One. He's proven he is as good as Leclerc. Leclerc might have a higher ceiling than Sainz, but at this moment in time, you could even argue that Sainz is better than Leclerc because he is that much more consistent. Leclerc obviously has great pace and is a brilliant driver, but he is quite mistake prone. And Sainz doesn't appear to be so. So I think 10 out of 10 performance. Somebody's got to sign him up. Yeah, what else? What else can I say?
Can I give the first 20 out of 10 rating?
I might
No.
have to allow that.
Yeah, I mean the performance that he showed in Australia, he did not show any signs of slowing down and any signs of weakness at all. I mean, when he got out of that car, he did look like a dead corpse getting out of that car after the race, um, due to obviously the strain and the weather and the warmness in Australia. It's a 10 out of 10. It's just, I mean, the viewers and the listeners will see the title of this podcast. And obviously it's a bit of vengeance, a bit of a happy return for Carlos Sainz. And like you said, three of the last four non-Red Bull wins, Carlos Sainz. Um yeah, 10 out of 10. Can't say much more. Um, I mean, the only thing that I'd probably point out is Charles Leclerc is younger of the two drivers, so I think maybe Ferrari are looking at a potential here, potential aspect. And Charles Leclerc probably has a bit more potential than Carlos Sainz, but I think Carlos Sainz is entering his prime years in Formula One. And it showed by his race victory in Melbourne, that overtake on Verstappen retiring, and Carlos Sainz just controlling that race. So yeah, 10 out of 10 without a shadow of a doubt. Fantastic race victory for Carlos.
Absolutely. Teammate up next in Charles Leclerc. I've given him a 9 out of 10. Solid performance. It can't be a 10 out of 10 because he did get beaten by his teammate. He was slower than his teammate all weekend. So that's why it's a 9 out of 10. But he beat the McLarens. Good, impressive performance and secured the 1-2 for Ferrari. Had a good battle with Norris, but came out on top. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc.
And it's a similar rating for me for Charles Leclerc. Qualifying aspect was a little bit iffy for me. I think he could have easily pushed Norris a little bit more, and especially Perez as well. But Perez got that grid drop, so Charles Leclerc moved a place anyway. Um, yeah, comfortably beaten by his teammate. I think even after the virtual safety car, when Charles Leclerc did manage to close up quite a bit, which I think was quite cheeky from him. But obviously dropped that gap, and in the end, I think finished around 2 seconds behind his teammate. But yeah, another comfortable performance. I think that second stop that Charles Leclerc made was kind of make or break. I think if Ferrari butchered his pit stop, I think Lando Norris would have been a hell of a lot closer, and it could have been a hell of a lot of closer in the battle for second. But Ferrari did their job, made a pit stop, made a good pit stop, got Charles Leclerc out ahead of Lando Norris, and the rest was history. A fantastic 1-2 finish, and I think the first Ferrari 1-2 finish in Australia since I want to say 2004 or 2005, which I mean 20 years, hell of a long time. But it was worth the wait. Yeah, think about it. the last 1-2 finish that Ferrari had in Australia was 2004, and I was 3 years old then. Crazy.
Crazy stat. Yeah, I think the last time there was a 1-2 finish in Australia for any team was Mercedes in 2019, and they went on to win both titles that year. So I'm not saying anything, but maybe Ferrari fans get their hopes up. They're clearly the second quickest car. And then, if we have occasions like today where Perez was on the pace, Verstappen had a problem, there's no reason to say why Ferrari can't at least be challenging for race victories this season. I think this is a sign of things to come. And it does make me a little bit excited for next year when Hamilton's going to be in that car. So hopefully they can continue the momentum, push a little bit further on, and maybe eight is going to come next year. On now to the last podium finisher, Lando Norris. It's a 9 out of 10 from me. Great performance. I don't think McLaren expected to be on the podium this season, or sorry, this weekend. I'm sure they would expect a few podiums over the course of the season. Given that how good Red Bull and Ferrari have been at the start of the season, I don't think they expected a podium here, but it's a welcome surprise. Norris had a good battle with Leclerc, ultimately was beaten, but it's a very, very good result for Norris. Good points in the Constructors' Championship, and I'd say that they quite comfortably have the third quickest car at this moment in time.
Yeah, we're trading ratings like we'd planned this. I've also gone with a 9 out of 10 for Lando Norris. Yeah, like you say, it was a welcome surprise that they managed to get on the podium and so early on because Red Bull and Ferrari seem to be leagues ahead of the McLarens and the Mercedes and the Aston Martins. But it's a welcome surprise. I mean, it was helped by Max Verstappen retiring from the race. Don't get me wrong, but Lando Norris was able to show better pace than Oscar Piastri this weekend and kind of comfortably beat his teammate and got a deserved podium. So yeah, 9 out of 10, good pace, good finish for Lando Norris and a very good podium finish.
On now to Oscar Piastri. They're coming by two on two at the minute. So first the Ferraris, now the McLarens. 8 out of 10. I can't quite give him a 9 because he was quite some way off his teammate. But again, a solid result. That's now two fourth place finishes in a row for Piastri. And it's been a good start to the season for him. He's up in fifth in the Drivers' Championship. He's actually ahead of his teammate Lando Norris. Um, and yeah, I don't know what else I can really add to it. It's a very solid performance and good start to the season from him.
I promise, guys, we have not scripted these ratings, but I've also gone with an 8 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. Well beaten by his teammate, like we said, but another driver that showed a very, very good race pace, was obviously able to fend off the likes of Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez to keep hold of that fourth place and to bring home a 3-4 for McLaren. And yeah, it's another good performance. I think Oscar Piastri is maturing quite quickly into Formula One, and like you say, he's ahead of his teammate in the championship. So it's another fantastic result for Oscar Piastri. It's just if and when he gets that podium and kind of kicks on and scores much more points this season. But for the Australian Grand Prix, it's a good finish in front of his home fans on his return to Australia, and it's a deserved 8 out of 10.
Sergio Perez up next, and it's a 6 out of 10 from me. I think it was a little bit disappointing for Perez. Obviously, had a good qualifying in third, got that grid drop, but he didn't really make up any positions. He didn't. Well, he made up just the one position, and that was inherited really through Verstappen's retirement. But he just didn't seem to have the pace to challenge the McLarens or the Ferraris, which is a bit of a shock. He did actually come out in his post-race interview and said that even if Verstappen hadn't retired, Ferrari would have won the race. It's a little bit concerning that he's saying that and that he's not even able to beat one of the McLarens, let alone both of the McLarens, and get himself onto the podium, as I think a lot of people would have expected from him. So yeah, 6 out of 10. Can't be too harsh, I don't think, because he did have a good qualifying, which was unfortunately taken away from him. But maybe I'm being a bit nice. I'm not really sure. 6 out of 10.
Finally, we've not scripted this, and I've gone with a 7 out of 10. I think if it wasn't for that grid drop, I think Sergio Perez would definitely be battling for the podium. And that unfortunate grid drop saw him start from sixth and kind of just make up for well, I mean the two places. If you're looking from the two places. What am I on about? The one place. After Verstappen's retirement. It was for me. It was a very, very mediocre race. We've spoken highly of Sergio Perez in the last two races, especially because Red Bull have finished 1-2, 1-2. And in this race, Verstappen's nowhere to be seen, and Perez can't pick up the pieces. But he did still put a good account of himself. He put a good defensive and attacking masterclass. But unfortunately, he just wasn't able to challenge the McLarens and wasn't able to challenge for the podium. So for me, I've gone with a 7. It was a good performance, but just not what Red Bull would have wanted from him. That's for sure.
Next up is Lance Stroll. I've given him an 8 out of 10. Now, on paper, this is a good result for Lance Stroll, but I think we have to really account for the fact that he did inherit two places on the last lap, essentially. Obviously, Russell retirement and then Alonso the penalty he got. So this is essentially an eighth place. But that being said, we've asked, this is what is frustrating about Stroll is because he had a good performance in Bahrain, binned it in Saudi, and then has had another decent performance here in Australia. So it is like a yo-yo at the minute. He's up and down. An 8 out of 10. Yeah, he's a little bit fortunate with that promotion, so I might be being a bit nice here.
Uh, well, if you're being too nice, I'm clearly being too nice because I've also gone with an 8 out of 10. It's a decent Lance Stroll performance. First and foremost, he's out qualified Fernando Alonso, so that's already one positive. The second positive, obviously, he inherited two places from Fernando Alonso and George Russell and Max Verstappen, so that's three places that he's inherited by relatively not doing anything. Um, but I mean, you've got to be there when these moments happen, and he was there. He picked up those places, and it's more valuable points for the team. And he's beating his teammate. Yes, his teammate did get a penalty. Um, but he's beating his teammate fair and square, technically speaking. And he beat his teammate in qualifying. So it swings and roundabouts. But it's valuable points for McLaren. It's McLaren, Aston Martin. Why did I say McLaren? Ignore me. But yeah, it's valuable points for the team, and it's valuable points for Lance Stroll. I wouldn't say he's the most confident of drivers, but I think after a sixth place finish, you can be sort of confident. So yeah, 8 out of 10, picked up three places by essentially not doing anything. But like I say, you've got to be there to pick up those places, and he did that. So yeah, 8 out of 10 from me.
Up next, Yuki Tsunoda, and it is quite easy 10 out of 10 performance. P7 in the RB is a great performance, 6 points. I don't think everybody was hyping them up a lot at the start of the season, but they were a little bit disappointing in the first two races. But Tsunoda again, another Q3 appearance. You could argue that he was lucky with the three retirements, but seventh place is a lot of points, and like we said, there's not going to be many points up for grabs. From the bottom five teams, essentially, you got the top five teams, and it's only on days like today or races like in Australia when you've got Hamilton and Verstappen retiring, Russell crashing, Alonso getting a penalty. So he's capitalized on it. He was clearly quicker than all of the cars below him and around him. So 6 points is a great haul from him. And he's continuing to dominate Daniel Ricciardo, who's a much more experienced driver.
Yeah, I've gone with a 9.5, 9 out of 10, I think. I mean, it's for a VCOB team, it's a fantastic performance. Don't get me wrong. Um, but there's obviously been a lot of hype and a lot of expectations around the team. So I don't think I can give him a 10 out of 10 because obviously the hype and the expectation for the V carbohydrate kind of makes me drop it down one. And like we mentioned with Lance Stroll, he's picked up places due to the unfortunate Max Verstappen George Russell and Fernando Alonso. So yeah, don't get me wrong, fantastic finish, fantastic points haul for the carb. But it's a 9 out of 10 from me.
Up next, Fernando Alonso, and eighth place finish for him. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 because I think he's ruined his own race with a moment of recklessness there at the end. And to be fair, I think if you compare the onboards or his telemetry data from the lap before to lap 58, he's actually entered the corner at the same speed, but he's braked 100 yards earlier than he did on the lap before, and he's actually had to accelerate again. So on that lap, he's braked, he's had to accelerate again and then take the corner because he's slowed down that much. And if you watch Russell's onboard, you compare it to the lap before to that lap, Alonso's car does like come towards him so quickly. And in the end, yeah, I think that penalty is completely warranted. And he was on for a good finish. I don't think Russell would have overtaken him even if he had if he took that corner normally. So 6 out of 10, and yeah, he's only got himself to blame, I feel like.
I've gone with a 7 out of 10. You say he's got himself to blame. Fernando Alonso did go on the radio and said he's got throttle issues. And if you look at the onboards, you can clearly see that his throttle is misfiring. He tries to apply the throttle, it misfires. So you can say it's down to him maybe braking too early or whatnot, but his throttle just simply was misfiring. So if you put all those aspects together, maybe his car was slowing him. Maybe his car was just slowing down because of the throttle misfires, etc., etc. The car was simply not 100%. Um, the penalty, I don't know whether it was justified or not, but I think with any crash like that, and with George Russell being tipped on his side with his wheel going underneath his car, I think potentially a penalty is kind of warranted. Um, and it's the new FIA rules that they apply 20 seconds to your lap time. So I've gone with a 7 out of 10 without that problem. I'm gonna call it a problem. I don't think it was a mistake. It was a problem. Without that problem, I think Fernando Alonso drives a very good race, finishes in P6, and finishes ahead of George Russell. So yeah, 7 out of 10 from me. It's just unfortunate that those problems and his mistake in quotation marks, kind of saw him drop down to P8 and not finish P6 in the end.
So what's your grade?
7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Up next is Nico Hulkenberg. He's finished up in ninth, and yet again, it's a 9 out of 10 from me. I thought it was a great performance, capitalized on the errors, like we said, and second points of the season, moves on to 3. So that is put him. He's actually moved down a position in the championship, I think, because Tsunoda's got 6 points, but very good result for him. More points for Haas, and they're now again, whilst they've moved down to 7th in the constructors, they've got a 4-point gap now to Alpine, Williams, Alfa Romeo, who haven't haven't got a point yet. So this has been a great start to the season from Haas, a lot better than anybody expected, including myself. So a 9 out of 10 and fully deserved.
Yeah, I'm gonna group both Hulkenberg and Magnussen in the same category. I've gone with a 9 out of 10 for both of them. I mean, a double points finish for the first time in 2 years. I think the last time the team scored double points was in Austria 22, when Mick Schumacher finished 6th and Kevin Magnussen finished 8th. I'm going to do a bit of research whilst I'm talking about the two of them, because I just want to make sure this is concrete. But yeah, I mean, what a return for Haas, and what a points scoring finish for the team. Yes, it is. 10th of July 2022, P6 and P8 for Haas, in Australia 24, 9th and 10th. So the first double points finish since Austria 2 years ago. And what a return it is. I mean, we saw in Saudi Arabia their extreme teamwork, and I spoke about it at the start of this episode. And I think as the Grand Prix progressed, they obviously, similarly to your Stroll, your Sonoda, they were there to capitalize on the DNFs of George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen. And so there's already 3 places gained there. And if you look how many places Magnussen gained, it was 4 in total. So technically, he's made up 1 place. And I believe it was on your Alex Albon. And Nico Hulkenberg coming from P16 to finish P9 ahead of his teammate. Yes, his qualifying may not have been brilliant, but he's there to get inside the points and finish inside the points alongside his teammates. So for Haas, it's a fantastic race finish, double points. Yes, I may have dropped in the championship, in the Constructors' Championship, but regardless of that, they've taken points once again in another race, and they take a lot of confidence heading into China.
Absolutely. So yeah, so you've gone for a 9 out of 10 for both. I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Kevin Magnussen. I just had to give Hulkenberg that slight edge. Although, like we said, Kevin Magnussen's been brilliant so far this season. Got the team a point in Jeddah because of his brilliant defensive performance. And then showed he's got the pace here today, or here at Australia, with a 10th place finish himself. So double points. Great effort from everyone at Haas, and they've had a very good start to this season. Up next, Alex Albon, finish in 11th, and it's a 6 out of 10 from me. I think I'm not sure whether this is a bit harsh because he only missed out on the points by just the 1 place. But again, you take out those 3 incidents, and it's 14th, and that's a whole different look. So you've got to give Haas their dues for getting the points, but for everybody else, it's almost like this is a missed opportunity, and maybe that plays into it a little bit. So 6 out of 10 for Alex Albon, especially with that crash in practice. Maybe that affected him a little bit because obviously Sargent and Albon's car would be set up slightly differently depending on their preferences, depending on how much oversteer they like, or the suspension, the tightness of it, the how the ride height is. All of these different variables may have affected him, may have contributed to him, but wouldn't have if he didn't crash in practice. So 6 out of 10.
I've gone for a slightly harsh rating. I've gone for a 5 out of 10. I've gone slap bang in the middle. And I'm going to base my facts on Williams thinking that Alex Albon was the best chance of points in Australia, and him just unable to deliver that. They've not scored a point yet this season. I wouldn't say they're completely on the back foot, but knowing that they didn't bring a chassis, they are slightly on the back foot. And I wouldn't say it brings the team a whole lot of confidence that Albon finished in P11. It's just testament to the Haas team able to capitalize on errors and mistakes. And Albon, I know he finished 1 place outside the points. Don't shoot me, don't shoot the messenger. But he was Williams' best chance at points, and he wasn't able to deliver that. So, with that being said, it's just a bit of a dampener on the Williams team that they had to essentially retire 1 car, run 1 car, and for their most talented driver not be able to deliver points. So for me, it's slap bang in the middle, average 5 out of 10. I don't think it was anything special. I don't think it was brilliant. Qualifying, Alex Albon usually likes to qualify closer to Q3. 12th place for me, very good. But yeah, he probably wanted to finish inside the points and was a little bit more hungrier. So I've gone with a bit of a harsher 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I suppose if you have both cars running, there's more opportunities with the strategy. There's more opportunities to do something similar to what Haas done last weekend, where you can play it tactically, not to that extent, of course, because Australia is a very quick track, and I think there's a lot more overtaking opportunities than at Jeddah. But you could, there's ways of working the strategy to benefit with 2 cars in play. How many times have we seen, when I think in 2021 when Mercedes had Bottas and Hamilton up at the pace, and maybe Perez was slightly off or Bottas was slightly off, and they could use that second car to give them an advantage in the strategy. But yeah, like I said, it's so works out at 5.5 for Albon, but disappointing for him, especially given the crash in FP1. Ricardo up next, and I've gone quite harsh. I've gone for a 4 out of 10. I think he's been well beaten by his teammate. And you look at what he's only finished 12th again, but look at where he would have finished if it wasn't for those retirements. Tsunoda would have still been in and around the points if you take into account all of those incidents. Ricardo would have been as low as 15th. So not a good result for him, and he needs to really pick up his form. He's been given an ultimatum, which I don't agree with because we're only 3 races into the season, but he does need to. This is a man who we thought would be looking at the Red Bull seat for next year. At this current rate, he'll be lucky to keep his seat in Formula One, and it's a shame to see because I do like Daniel Ricciardo. I think he's a brilliant driver, but he needs to start stepping up.
I've not split Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo much. I've also gone with a 5 out of 10 for Daniel Ricciardo. Qualifying wasn't brilliant, but then obviously made up 6 places, 3 of those places from the 3 retirements up ahead of him, and obviously made up places on Gasly, Bottas, and Ocon. Um, so yeah, you say you don't agree with the ultimatum. I know Nick De Vries didn't get the ultimatum until probably the mid stage of last season, but like you say, this is the man that was likely to get the Red Bull seat in 2025, and he's not showing any of that. Sonoda's more likelier to get the Red Bull seat than Daniel Ricciardo on his performances in the first 3 races. Daniel Ricciardo's been nowhere near his pace. So it's a deserved ultimatum. It's a deserved kick up the arse for Daniel Ricciardo because we know the talent and we know the experience and we know the F1 know-how that Daniel Ricciardo has. He's just not used it at all this season. And to recover to P12 is a good enough finish, but it's nowhere near the standards of Daniel Ricciardo and is nowhere near his teammates. So yeah, 5 out of 10 from me.
Next up is Pierre Gasly. He's finished down in 13th. I've given him a 5 out of 10. I know that Alpine is nowhere near it. He's beaten his teammate after starting behind him. So there's one thing, but Alpine just aren't where they want to be at the minute. They're really struggling. It's been better in the last couple of races in particular. I think both Gasly and Ocon have now got 13th place finishes, but they don't look like challenging for points, and that would be the worry, especially because they're 2 very, very good drivers. Are they extracting the maximum out of the car? It's difficult to tell, but it's a difficult weekend and it's a difficult time at the minute for Alpine.
Yeah, another 5 out of 10 from me. It's another average race performance. And for Pierre Gasly and Alpine, it's a team that is struggling a hell of a lot this season so far. To finish 13th behind a Williams and a V-Carb, it's you probably weren't expecting that at the start of last season, but at the start of this season, it's kind of a reality for Alpine of how slow they are so far this season. Um, to finish 13th, I suppose it's a welcome sort of surprise for Alpine, and that things aren't as bad as it seems, but I think upgrades are necessary and sort of something has to change at Alpine because I think from what I saw on the race pace data, only Williams in race pace was slower than them. So 9th slowest in race pace is a worrying sign. And in China, it could be a whole lot different, especially with a track layout kind of being twisty and windy, and there only being realistically one DRS long straight with overtaking opportunities. So yeah, it's a 5 out of 10, another 5 out of 10, and it's another performance where you're thinking hopefully things pick up for Alpine and for Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, who are 2 very talented drivers.
And next up is Valtteri Bottas. I'm going to group Valtteri Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou together. They finished 14th and 15th. Neither qualified particularly high. I know Bottas actually was 13th, but slipped backwards, especially given the 3 retirements around. So to only finish 14th is a bit disappointing. I've given them both a 4 out of 10. Yet again, we're seeing this strange, awful pit stops again from Stake. I think they were saying they wanted to make sure that Valtteri or the pit stops were sort of 6 or 7 seconds instead of 50 seconds. So they were going to take the time over it, but it was still about 15 to 20 seconds for Bottas. I don't know what's going wrong with their pit stop equipment, but they really need to get it sorted because this is costing them. You had Guan Yu Zhou in Jeddah, who was having a brilliant race up until that pit stop, which cost him so much time. Valtteri Bottas was having a decent race in Bahrain before he had a 50-second pit stop. What is going on with their pit stops? But it seems to be one of the biggest talking points around the team at the minute, and that's never a good sign when you're losing. It's essentially 2 pit stops. You're losing a pit stop actually sat waiting for the tires to be put on. The amount of time it takes to go through the pit stop if you just had a perfect stop. So it's essentially 2 pit stops in one that they're having. So the drivers can't particularly do anything, but it's got to be a 4 out of 10 from both of these.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention to our Australian viewers, Ethan did not call him the S word. It's actually we're going to call him Sauber, due to the rules over in Australia.
Oh, of
That does
course.
not.
No, kick Sauber. Sorry, they're kick Sauber
Yeah,
for Australia, aren't they? And I think a couple of
yeah,
other races.
kicks out for Australian viewers and Qatari viewers, etc., etc., who have banned the famous gambling company beginning with an S and ending with an E. But yeah, I'll also group the two of them. I've also gone with 4 out of 10. And I do have your answer on why the pit stops are as slow as they are. It's due to the designs of the actual wheels. So the actual wheel nuts, uh, funnily enough, it's to do with the design. So the Sauber have completely butchered their design, and their wheel nuts, especially when they're trying to take tires off, are simply an odd shape. So they're spending that whole time having to take off the tires purely on the basis that their actual wheel and their wheel trim is not the kind of the correct shape for the actual wheel nut and for the guys with the machines to take it off. So that's your answer for that question. Um, and the answer to why they are so slow at the pit stops is exactly that. The wheels are simply do not go round and round; they go square, square, square. And it's the pit stops, like you say, that have been costing Kick Sauber. And it's a worrying sight that maybe they finally realised some clogs are finally ticking, going, yeah, maybe we need to redesign because our pit stops are not getting quicker and quicker, they're getting slower and slower. So yeah, maybe they kind of need to change their design. Not maybe, certainly. But for me, it's another bog standard it's another bog standard Sauber performance, and a 4 out of 10 for both of them.
And the final finisher, Esteban Ocon, finished all the way down in 16th. And I've given him a 3 out of 10. I think he was quite a way behind Gasly. So you've got to say if you're giving Gasly sort of a 5 out of 10, then he's got to be deducted at least a couple of points. So yeah, 3 out of 10 for Ocon. I don't really know what to say. I think everything I said for Gasly is applicable here as well.
Yeah, similar for me. I've also gone with a 3 out of 10. Yeah, I don't know what I can add on for Esteban Ocon really. Finishing last of the race finishes. And it's an Alpine team that is quite struggling. So yeah, 3 out of 10. I don't think I can add much more. It's just another race finish where they finished at the bottom of the pack, and it's another hard pill to swallow for an Alpine team that is struggling right now.
So the first 2 retirees, George Russell, I've gone for a 7 out of 10. I think he's been very unlucky with that late retirement. Obviously, I've said that I think that Alonso's been a bit crafty there, and he's almost a passenger. Then you see the amount of downforce he's lost just by closing up a couple of tenths. And he's an absolute passenger at that point. He goes into the gravel, and then he's got a barrier staring at his face. So on the last lap as well, which is so unfortunate for him, but a 7 out of 10 because I thought he was having a decent time up until then. Was going to deliver solid points and was again the quicker of the Mercedes.
Yeah, I've also gone with a 7 out of 10. Qualifying performance relatively good and was running very well in the race. And if we're calling Fernando Alonso crafty or not, it's up to interpretation. But was relatively running well in the race, quicker than the two Mercedes, and it was unfortunate that um, Fernando Alonso up ahead had throttle issues, and George had to kind of take avoiding action and skirted into the gravel and was out of the race. So yeah, 7 out of 10 up until that point. It could have been easily if he finished the race an 8 out of 10 if he made that move on Fernando Alonso's stick. But yeah, for me, it's a 7.
Lewis Hamilton up next. I've gone for a 4 out of 10. Obviously, the retirement itself wasn't his fault, but he's qualified. He's got knocked out in Q2. I don't think he made up a whole lot of progress up until the point he retired. I know he retired about lap 15, lap 16, but up until then, he's not made up many positions at all. So it's got to be a 4 out of 10, unfortunately, as disappointing as it is.
Yeah, I'll stick with your ratings for Hamilton and Verstappen purely on the basis I kind of put them as not applicable. Purely on the basis as well that they didn't finish over half a race. So if we're going purely on qualifying, then yeah, I'll stick with your rating of 4 out of 10 and whatever you give for Verstappen as well.
I was actually kind of hoping you'd give a grade for Verstappen because I'm in a split mind. I'm debating between a 6 and a 7 over Verstappen because he's qualified on pole. He's done everything right. He did get passed by Sainz early on, but I think he would have ended up winning the race had it not been for that brake issue. So it's a difficult one. I'm leaning more towards a 7, to be honest. So you're saying a 6, so we'll split down the middle. Then we'll go for a 6.5. If we're not in agreement, then that's fine by me. Yeah, you can't. It's a difficult one because I'm sure it would have been a 9 or a 10 out of 10 had he finished the race, but obviously he didn't. So we can only go on what we've seen. Got pole position. Obviously that's why it's so high. But obviously retiring on lap 3, I think it was. You're not going to be able to get the very high grades. But that rounds up our Australia predictions. So, predictions, sorry. No, we'll be doing that next week. That rounds up our Australia Grand Prix review. We'll be back next week for the predictions and looking ahead to Japan as well, which is another early start. Not quite as early, but again, it's a 6 a.m. rise instead of a 4 a.m. rise. So at least that'll be you can justify that almost. You can almost justify waking up at 6 a.m. to watch a Grand Prix rather than at 4 a.m. So yeah, we'll be back next week reviewing or looking forward to that, reviewing our predictions from this weekend. And until then, thank you all for listening and we'll see you in the next episode.